On this episode of the Spiritual Gangsta Certified podcast, you have to be patient with your dream, right? So big patience, putting in the daily work, your habits, right? How you work in your work environment. This is all Virgo stuff. But so is taking responsibility, taking the helm of, being in charge of, doing your due diligence, having integrity.
You're now tuned into Spiritual Gangsta Certified with Illy Vish.
Hey y'all, so happy to have another episode of the Spiritual Gangsta Certified podcast back up and on. How's everybody doing? It's been interesting out here. That's actually a really big dramatic understatement. Interesting to say the very least. I'm going to spend some time in this episode speaking about what I think has added to that interesting flavor was the nodal switch to North Node in Pisces, South Node in Virgo. Also, we're at the very tail end of Neptune's 14-year transit through Pisces. I have to be honest, I saw a post, I'm trying to remember who it was by, but it got me to thinking about how, and I'm a Pisces sun in Mercury, so the ruler of both my sun and Mercury have been home as far as modern rulership is concerned, as Pisces is anciently ruled by Jupiter. But, it's kind of felt like a little bit of a collective spell, if we could call it that. But I've noticed that as we get to the tail end of this transit, not only are my Pisces placements extraordinarily happy, don't even get me started on the year that I had a solar return with Neptune conjunct my sun within 1 minute, and I had a mysterious illness. Anyway, we're preparing for some big astrological shifts this year. Saturn will also be moving into Aries, and me and Marie Rousseau will be doing a wonderful Saturn seminar in May on that. I will have the date out as well as the invitation soon. I think it's going to be extraordinarily important for people to understand the astrological energy at play, because as things are moving forward and a lot of people are having a hard time feeling grounded, secure, safe, there's a lot of uncertainty in the air, a lot of chaos. Some people feel like they have been just knocked off of their proverbial square and thrown down into chaos. So we want to talk about some of that. Now, I can say I felt the recent energy to be kind of refreshing. I have loved the nodal shift for me. It doesn't look like everybody else is handling it well, though, and that is where we're having an issue. But I just wanted to say to everybody, you're not alone. And what I plan on doing to make you feel less alone, especially if you're listening to this podcast or a part of the wonderful Spiritual Gangsta Certified Facebook community, I want to interact with you guys more. I want to share some of the things that I do and am doing and I'm going to do with you all. So I've decided I'm going to start a Twitch channel specifically to connect with you guys on the fly. I'm going to be starting this the week of my birthday, which is March 10th, and I'll be having some birthday festivities. A lot of you have seen that back in October I was posting about having a slumber party in North Carolina, and then it was hurricane season and all of that terrible damage happened to some areas of North Carolina during hurricane season. So I had to cancel my trip, but it's back on, and we'll be on our way the week of my birthday, and so much fun stuff I want to do with you guys. This is kind of a party for me to be able to reconnect, me and my good friends who will be there, to reconnect with our inner child. So I can't wait to cover that and to share a lot of the other things. I have been talking about doing courses for forever. And while Saturn has been transiting my Mercury and my Sun, I buckled down and really dug deep into course creation. So a lot of you will be really, really happy about that. And I can't wait to share that with you as well. But stay tuned for more of the Spiritual Gangsta Certified podcast. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Spiritual Gangsta Certified podcast. I am your host, Janét Jones, aka Illy Vish, and boy is there a lot to talk about. So if you've been under a little bit of stress or any other negative emotion lately that's due to social media, you are not alone. I would have to say I would join you guys there. I'm actually going to talk about a lot of that here, especially things that I've noticed since about January 11th. And what was that? Well, that was the day at 6:01 p.m. and 42 seconds Eastern that the North nodes ingressed into Pisces and South node ingressed into Virgo from the previous nodal transit of the North node in Aries, South node in Libra. Now, there's lots to talk about here, and I want to make it as clear as possible for people who may not necessarily be familiar with the nodes. So I wanted to take it back a little bit. Now, the nodes of the moon, I guess when you look in an individual's chart, is very indicative of their life work this particular incarnation. For a lot of people who are into astrology, I don't think that a lot of people offhand realize that it pretty much is kind of embedded in astrology, that you've lived many lifetimes, right? Now, people may argue about this, but I know when I give my natal chart readings, one of the things that I focus on is one's North Node. Your purpose this lifetime, what you're striving for, while your South Node shows the energy that you've already kind of become accustomed to, and thus know how to use. Now, North Node and South Node is always going to be an axis. You know, they're going to be opposites. And taking it back to Hermetic principle, opposites are the same energy, just at different ends of the spectrum. And that's important to note. The reason that it's important to note is because if opposing energies are simply the same energy, just at varying degrees, that speaks a lot about how they work together. So one of the things that we have been dealing with and that I wanted to talk about are, number one, the lunar nodes are mathematical points where the moon's orbit intersects the sun's apparent path. So the sun's apparent path is called the ecliptic. It is the apparent path that the sun seems to take from our vantage point on Earth. Now, in the northern hemisphere, I should add. For a lot of people that don't necessarily understand this concept, this is what would separate Western tropical astrology from Vedic astrology. Because Western tropical astrology is literally based on the seasons. I stress this to people all the time just so that they can have a better understanding of what this is. But from our vantage point in the northern hemisphere, the sun appears to be closest to the equator when Aries season begins. The sun's ecliptic, if you watch the path from our vantage point in the northern hemisphere on Earth, it goes up to the Tropic of Cancer. When it hits that, we have summer. And then the sun appears to be moving down back towards the equator. And when it meets it, we'll have Libra season, aka fall. And then the sun dips below the equator and makes contact with the Tropic of Capricorn, at which point winter begins. And then the sun appears to start rising back up towards the equator again. And then we'll have spring again. And this continues. So what I wanted to basically touch on is that the significance of nodal transits as it relates to the collective. It's the North Node, let me say that again. The significance of the North Node is it's a point of growth, destiny, and what we're collectively moving towards when we look at it on a collective sphere, not an individual's chart. And thus the South Node would be a point of release. Past experiences and innate talent, that we transform or build upon. So because the nodes work together, it's not as if we're totally throwing away the South Node. We have to consider it for a lot of different reasons. And one of the things that I wanted to say about that is we're going to go back in time a little bit and look at some previous nodal transits. So going back to May 5th, 2020, the nodes moved to North Node in Gemini, South Node in Sagittarius, and that transit went on till January 18th, 2022. Now, collectively, if we think of some of the things that were happening, number one, that was an election year. We also had COVID and the lockdowns. And if the North Node and the purpose point is pointed towards Gemini and the South Node was in Sagittarius, I think one of the most widespread themes that we saw during that time was either people were going to be open to new information, which Gemini, ruled by the messenger Mercury, represents, or people were going to, nope, this is what I believe, I'm standing on my soapbox. We saw that happen widespread online, right? And then January 18th, 2022, the node shifted yet again. And because the nodes move in a natural retrograde motion, they move backwards through the zodiac sign. So that's something I wanted to mention. Now, with the nodal shift of the North Node to Taurus, South Node to Scorpio, that went on till July 17th, 2023. Interesting times. Now, I want to talk about how you can look at one transit being the result of another. So, if one was open to information, didn't stand on their soapbox, was open to different ideas, I feel like that left you in a better state by the time the nodal shift happened again to Taurus, Scorpio. Taurus, values. And Uranus happened to actually be in Taurus while this was happening. It's still there now. And that was an interesting thing because Uranus and Taurus was saying our values are going to be shaken up. You were going to get to see or suddenly understand where you stood morally on a lot of things versus where others did. Now, when the transit of Saturn being in Aquarius was happening, this was especially poignant. People were not only like kind of looking at their friendship circles like, what's going on here? Like, do I share values with people or not? Now, individual values with the North Node and Taurus versus ways that we had done things previously. Now, I know a lot of people have been looking at the effects of, what actually started during, I believe, Jupiter and Scorpio, the Me Too movement. And I talked about this a little bit in the last podcast about everything that's happening, like in the music industry, especially with Diddy, or as I kept calling him, Puffy. I really feel like this was a time frame. It was like a tipping point. Collectively, people were agreeing on what was okay and not okay, and a lot of past abuse, sexual abuse, sexual impropriety, a lot of that was starting to rise to the surface because collectively we need to do better. right? And then July 17th, 2023 through January 11th, 2025, the nodes were in Aries, Libra. So North Node in Aries, South Node in Libra. And I described that time period as being extremely significant because relationships were going to come up for review. I said this amongst my friendship circle and clients that was a time frame where people were literally, because if you look at Libra energy, that represents one-to-one relationships, not necessarily romantic, doesn't have to, be marriage, but can be. But it's also any one-to-one contact. This is friendships you have with people, or another person, I should say, a business partnership. And I started describing to people how relationships are basically contracts. I'm not saying that everybody formally sits down and meets out all their terms, but over the course of getting to know someone in a one-to-one situation, you're learning about them, what they value, what they hold valuable, what it is their boundaries are, and what it is their boundaries aren't, and vice versa. And in friendships, anytime any of those terms have been breached, that's when there's potential friendship or relationship problems. Sometimes that basically manifests into people deciding not to deal with each other anymore. And that time frame was rife with me just seeing that happen everywhere. Breakups were like super common to see, or people realizing they didn't necessarily want the situation that they were in, but not being able to do anything about it, which I feel for people in those situations. So now, with the nodal shift that began on January 11th to, the North Node being in Pisces, South Node being in Virgo, this is quite interesting. Number one, because upon this ingress, we were looking at the fact that, Neptune is at the end degrees of Pisces finally after about 14 years. The day that this transit started, Saturn was at 15 degrees of Pisces, Venus was at 9 degrees of Pisces. It was quite interesting. Now, this 18-month period is going to be really significant, but because of some politics in the U.S. here and the fact that the inauguration of Donald Trump happened shortly after the nodal shift to Pisces, Virgo, I feel like we entered a whole different energy that was palpable, feelable, and just intense. Now, one of the things that I'm telling people about this is that, okay, first of all, it's going to go on till the end of July in 2026. And because any axis we speak about in astrology, talking about those opposites, being the same energy at different ends of the spectrum, they work together in a way to create a balance. Any opposition is calls for a balance. Balance. So the main themes that started popping up for me is there has to be a better integration of spirituality and practicality. This is also speaking to healing on both spiritual and physical levels. In some ways, this transit calls on us to kind of release some of the perfectionism, which Virgo would be the sign of it, and its pursuit of perfectionism is what makes it so exacting. However, that can be a shadow side to Virgo, because if you're too nitpicky, you miss the bigger picture, right? So releasing perfectionism would allow us to embrace the bigger picture and learn to flow. Pisces is very go with the flow energy. So the types of things that people could be focusing on during this transit, even though I know it's so hard for everybody to, because especially in the US, politically everything has exploded, but this would be more so about focusing on mental health, maybe holistic healing, your responsibility to the environment, and, challenges with people maybe balancing out their selfless behavior, which is Pisces. It can be a bit martyrdom behavior, but also at the same time maintaining your healthy boundaries. Now, we want to think about a few things here. We don't want to get rid of Virgo traits, right? We can't. But some of the things that would be positive that we could glean from the South Node being in Virgo is to be more organized, analytical, pay more attention to details, consider more how you could be of service, and, being more methodical. Now, the shadow side to that, like I said, is over perfectionism, being too critical, and even anxiety is a Virgo trait. Now, balancing that out with some of the positive aspects of Pisces, like being compassionate, being intuitive, creative, spiritual, having more empathy, even though the transit going on simultaneous to this of Saturn being in Pisces feels like it's kind of clamped down on some compassion and, empathy. Now, also, even though the nodes are pointed, or the North Node is pointed towards, I guess you could say, Pisces themes, we have to be very aware of the negative Pisces themes, like escapism, being too idealistic, and having no boundaries. Now, collectively, there are many examples that we can see about this, and I'm really hoping I get more opportunities to speak about this because, yes, we're talking about one transit, but it's lasting like a year and a half. So it's significant. Now, there may be some people right now who know that their North Node is in Pisces, South Node in Virgo in their birth chart. And if that is you, that means that you're having what's called a nodal return. And this is a once in every 18-year event. So you could kind of look at it as almost a realignment with your soul's purpose. It's like a reminder. Now, if you think back, depending on how old you are, if you're like roughly 18 or 19 years old, this is your first nodal return. But I can think back on the different ones that I had. Now, I have North Node in Leo, South Node in Aquarius, and upon my second nodal transit, I was realigned to come out of the astrological closet, I guess you could say. I had been hiding in it. It's when I decided to actually launch Spiritual Gangsta Certified, which is very much in alignment with my purpose. And to those having a nodal return, I want you to seriously consider the implications of what it means. I would recommend a book to you called Astrology for the Soul by Jan Spiller. Very good stuff to help you understand your life's purpose via your nodes. Now, there may be some people that have the opposite going on right now. People who have North Node in Virgo and South Node in Pisces. Well, this transit would represent being a nodal opposition for you. So the nodes are the opposite of what yours are. And what this translates to is being a time to reflect on the balance between your past lessons and future growth. Harmonizing, calibrating yourself. Now, along with this, because some people don't necessarily have a familiarity with how the nodes are operating in their charts, let alone how they're operating on a collective scale, but I wanted to talk about some things. I wanted to make it a little bit more personal and less general, but remember that Pisces and Virgo are both mutable signs. This means they're adaptable, and change is key. The mutable signs, would be Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. Now, if you happen to have a North Node in Gemini or Sagittarius, or South Node in Gemini or Sagittarius, then you're going through a nodal square. So this indicates that there's tension, and that tension usually means it's indicative of growth needs to happen. So tension that challenges you to integrate the lessons of all four mutable signs. change is the only constant we have. Maybe it's easier for me to understand this being, born a Pisces sun, but it definitely is. So the themes, if you're going through a nodal square, are, having more mental flexibility, releasing any outdated beliefs, and embracing spiritual and practical growth. So what's key here, no matter whether it's a square, an opposition, or return you're going through, is that adaptability and openness are themes. All of this is for your better growth. Now, I think one of the most important things that we can do these days so that we can quantify and qualify our growth in retrospect. So after we've gotten out of this period and we want to kind of look back on it and see what we've learned, I always encourage journaling. I know everybody doesn't necessarily have time, to write every day. So one of the things that I suggest, if you have like a voice recorder on your phone, on your iPad, on whatever, you can use that. I've been using this app called Honestly, and it has some journal prompts and you just answer it, but sometimes I'll just tell it about my day. It transcribes everything you're saying and then it tracks it. And I think that is extraordinarily important, especially because of all the astrological work that I do when I'm constantly studying how different transits or time frames are impacting me or other people. But I just want to stress how important it is to get things out. And I think these days, with people being so busy, if you don't have time to write, you can still journal. There are still options. Now, of course, meditation and mindfulness practices would be things that I would, in general, encourage for people. But I think this is a specific time where there's kind of this dance between spirituality and practicality. So in order to best navigate that, it's even more important to practice mindfulness, to be able to meditate, to get yourself to a state of peace, which Pisces represents. And then we could all use some of this. Setting healthy boundaries while nurturing compassion and empathy, y'all. See, one of the shadow aspects of Pisces energy that I'll talk about is martyrdom. Throwing yourself on a hill, dying on this hill for things. One of the Piscean traits that, I learned early on, being the little Pisces sun that I am, is Pisces can be overgiving, making sacrifices for people that they didn't even ask to be made, and then being upset when those sacrifices aren't appreciated. It's interesting. It's very interesting. Now, I want to focus more, I guess, for the ending of this, just in getting people to understand that it's chaotic right now. It's funny how when you learn astrology, you realize how many different themes can fit under the rulership of a sign. While Pisces is peace, it's also chaos. What I take from that, especially as chaotic as things are, even on social media, I need to just do a video grab to show you guys. By the time the node shifted up until maybe the middle of February, there was a sharp turn on social media. Now, you guys know, if you follow my Spiritual Gangsta Certified Facebook page, you're prone to see anything over there, be it some astrological insight, spiritual memes, or just general conversation. Well, I've been doing that for a while. I mean, I started this in 2018, but oh my God, what it was bringing out of people. It clearly felt way different. And Mars was in Cancer and retrograde in Cancer for most of that time period too. The passive aggressiveness, the assumptions, the attacking. I just was like, holy crap. It felt like chaos. And during that time frame, I was like, you know what? I can't corral cats. This is something I'm not willing to do. And usually if you follow the page, you see how outspoken I can be when it comes to people being outwardly disrespectful. I just got to the point where it was happening so often, especially from assumptions people were making. I was like, I'm not engaging. I was just blocking people or ignoring them, depending on what they said or did. I chose my battles. I did engage a little bit, but it got so chaotic. The only thing my Pisces ass could think to do was like, you know what? I got to pull back a little bit because I need peace. So I'm saying this to say you do not have to attend every argument you are invited to. You do not have to add to the chaos. There's something to be said for trying to find a space of peace for yourself in the midst of it feeling and being chaotic in the world. It is not an easy feat, and everybody doesn't necessarily find peace the same ways, but it's important to find yours. Whatever that is, getting in contact with it, particularly doing so in solitude, which is another Pisces keyword. That's usually where I find a lot of my answers, but I have 12 house placements and some Pisces energy, so perhaps that lends to it, but sounds cliched. I wish there was something that I could say that was a broad panacea to make everybody feel better, but that's just simply not realistic. Please work on finding your peace. Virgo also represents health. Pisces can represent illness. The axis of that, calibrating yourself for the best results. What are the things that you know you need to get looked at? A lot of people have been avoiding going to the doctor or getting things looked at health-wise. This is prime time to do that because the illness is going to be on display, so to speak. So kind of going back to what I was saying about the nodes moving in a natural retrograde motion, meaning when they enter a sign, instead of starting at 0 degrees, it starts at 29 degrees and works backward. I always thought this was fascinating that that's the movement, because it almost feels like as soon as the nodes ingress to a sign or enter at 29 degrees and 59 minutes, that's like the most crisis point ever. You can see all of the chaos, all of the things like blaringly clear. Oh my God, this is the theme. And then we're going to work backwards through these 18 months to the 0 degree and 0 minute point. What's so poignant about this to me is it shows like all of the chaos that's on display currently so that we can see it and it can be felt, so then we can work through it. With that in mind, I also wanted to share some things that you could do to make this a little bit easier for yourself, right? So we don't want to completely suspend our compassion for other people, but we do want to have the boundaries to recognize and realize when something that belongs to someone else or someone else's issue or someone else's problem, no matter how much we can empathize or sympathize with it, you got to have the appropriate boundaries to be able to separate. Pisces is all encompassing energy. It's the energy of everything is connected. And yes, we should definitely remember that we are all connected, but not in such a way that it holds you up for doing the work that you need to do for yourself and on yourself. Taking on too much of other people's shit is never the answer to being able to find your peace. You've got to create healthy boundaries. Some people are going to see through this transit that they haven't had good boundaries. Some people are going to see through this transit that they've had far too many boundaries and haven't allowed for other possibilities, I guess I could say, to kind of manifest. Like listen, and I understand this as a person with a lot of Virgo energy in my chart too. There can be doing too much to root down to specifics to the detriment of whatever it is you're doing. When they say that the devil is in the details, that's what that means. It is possible to get too caught up in specifics and thereby miss an entire opportunity. Don't let that be you. as I keep saying, when I make these, I need to make podcast episodes more often. And having slowed my progressed Taurus ass down, my sun has progressed to Taurus and I finally feel comfortable in it. It's just about taking my time. So I promise more of these with some interesting guests, by the way. Also, we will be doing me and Marie Russo will be doing a Saturn in Aries seminar. And I can't wait to do this one. I think it's going to be really important to break down how this is going to go and how to recognize individually how you'll be impacted, so you know how to best navigate that. I'll be posting soon details about how you can get tickets to that. We just want to make sure that not only are people understanding the transit itself of Saturn being Aries, but Saturn and the significance when it's in certain signs, the significance when you're looking at where it is versus where it was when you were born. All of this is highly important, so stay tuned for details about that. I appreciate you all for listening. I know it's some wonky energy out here. You're not alone though. All of us are kind of going through something. Once again, and I say this, and I really do mean it, people reach out to me all the time. If you're having a problem, just need someone to talk to, pop into the messages over on the Spiritual Gangsta Certified Facebook page. Y'all be easy. I'll talk to you again soon. I also wanted to add that with Virgo energy, the way to think of this transit in terms of finding a balance between the Pisces energy and the Virgo energy, it's not that we collectively are like eschewing and ignoring Virgo energy from here on out. No, this axis that I keep referring to as, big picture versus the smaller details of things, how it serves us to be Virgoan is, for now, while we can imagine, which is Piscean, right? We can see in our mind's eye that which we wish to experience, right? While we can count it on what we dream for ourselves, the only way to really bring those dreams into fruition are to keep certain things in mind. When we think of Virgo energy, I need you guys to understand, sometimes you'll hear me talk about like a sign and the essence of it. And when I'm describing it, what I'm doing is putting that sign on the ascendant and talking about what occupies each house cusp. So that's something to get in the practice of doing astrologically. It really does help. But particularly when I think about Virgo energy, and I'm walking into a Virgo rising solar return year, so Virgo essence is definitely how my year will be colored. I think about a few different things. Number one, Capricorn energy is near and dear to me, as I am a Capricorn moon. If we put Virgo on the ascendant and we talk about the other two earth signs and how they add to the essence of Virgo, what we'll wind up with is this. Virgo has Capricorn in the 5th house, at the heart. The 5th house, naturally ruled by Leo. Leo rules the heart, right? At the heart of it, what's vital to Virgo energy is Capricorn energy. The ability to delegate, take responsibility for. They're responsible at the core. So when you hear people describe Virgos or Virgo energy. But then, what's in the 9th house of Virgo? Taurus. So when we talk about Virgo energy, and we're talking about the 9th house, anything there is expounded upon, so to speak. It is accentuated. It is blessed by Jupiter, since the 9th house is naturally ruled by Jupiter. So, in essence, big Taurus energy from Virgo. This is, you have to be patient with your dream, right? So, big patience, putting in the daily work, right? Extremely important. Extremely important. Your habits, right? how you work in your work environment. This is all Virgo stuff. But so is taking responsibility, taking the helm of, being in, charge of, doing your due diligence, having integrity. Fifth house stuff for Virgo. And then, of course, the ninth house stuff I just mentioned. So it just dawned on me, I should have put it that way in the beginning of this talk. So I circled back around to add that. But everybody, I am telling you, the benefits of absorbing and understanding how you can be more Virgoan through this transit while simultaneously allowing room to be Piscean and finding harmony. It's super important, y'all. I love you.